Is aim assist overpowered in Warzone 2 and by extension Modern Warfare 2? This is a really big question that's been rattling around the internet recently, with top streamers like XQC reacting to aim assist in Warzone 2, comment sections being lit on fire, and even one of my most recent videos seeing an influx of comments both for and against aim assist and talking about how it was extremely overpowered. And that video wasn't even about aim assist, it was about gyroscopic aiming, which you can check out if you want to. It seems if you listen to some content creators online, especially PC players, and certain YouTubers and comment sections, the aim assist is effectively the equivalent of an aimbot, and that it's super overpowered, and that it shouldn't be a feature in Warzone 2. The difficulty with these conversations about aim assist online is that you get this sort of platform tribalism, where console and controller players traditionally say no, it is not, and keyboard and mouse players on PC argue that it's basically cheating and extremely overpowered. So I figured I'd answer this question today as somebody who plays keyboard and mouse for every single first-person shooter except for Battlefield and Call of Duty, because these are games that I've always played on controller as a former console player. And I figured this gives me a very unique perspective of somebody who knows the struggles of both platforms, the difficulties they face, and how some instances of gameplay can produce results that feel unfair or unbalanced. And what's made this debate even more fiery is that the playing field is effectively even now. On console, you have an FOV slider, the current generation PS5 and Series X are seemingly doing 120 FPS with no problem, and even if you're on a high-end rig on PC, unless you're on a super top tier rig, you're probably seeing frame rates in and around the same region as console players as well, with FOV slider capability. So I decided to hop into a private lobby of Modern Warfare 2 to understand the aim assist mechanics in Modern Warfare 2 and by extension Warzone 2, because they do appear to be identical from the testing I've done, and see what the situation is and whether or not aim assist truly is overpowered, and is it something that should be changed. A lot of work and testing went into this video, so if you could drop a like and subscribe, and let me know your comments, thoughts, and feelings by the end of this, that would be super great. So what do we know about aim assist in Warzone 2 and Modern Warfare 2, and how does it differ from Modern Warfare 2019 and Warzone 1? And the answer to that is that it's a lot of the same, but with a bit more refinement. Now we'll answer the big question of whether or not it's overpowered a little bit later, but in terms of the key functionality, Warzone 1 and Warzone 2 share a lot of similarities. Rotational aim assist works at hipfire up until 25 meters, and it works whilst aiming down sight up till 200 meters. Now, of course, there are some caveats to this. Of course, if a target is 200 meters away, the actual character model and the aim assist bubble, so to speak, is smaller, and therefore it feels as though the overall strength of aim assist has been reduced. But it does still exist. The same applies to sniper rifles, it does still exist up until a certain range, in this case 200 meters. Now of course, much like Modern Warfare 2019 and Warzone 1, the same applies in Warzone 2 and Modern Warfare 2022, that rotational aim assist is really the big sticking point here. Slowdown aim assist isn't entirely massively strong. The actual aim itself only slows down by a few percentages, but this is exacerbated by rotational aim assist, which is when one character is strafing and you yourself are strafing, the game is trying to latch onto your opponent. And you can see this in the footage in the background. I'm not actually moving my aiming stick, I'm not actually trying to precise track my target, but when I strafe in an opposite direction to a target in front of me, the game does its best to track that opponent. And this works on both the horizontal and vertical axes. If somebody jumps down in front of you, aim assist will kick in exactly the same rotational setup. So in terms of tracking opponents and centering, aim assist in close range scenarios is extremely powerful. And even without really trying to aim or adjust or make micro adjustments, a controller will do, I would say, about 40 to 30% of the work for you. As a target heads into the distance, their overall character model decreases, and the aim assist bubble where this locks into also decreases, and considering the horizontal and vertical recoil in Modern Warfare 2 and Warzone 2, it does become much more challenging to hit an opponent over range, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Now, one thing that needs to underpin this entire video is a setting called field of view. If you're playing at a higher field of view in Modern Warfare 2 or Warzone 2, which realistically, depending on the size of your screen and the distance you're sitting away from it, you probably are or probably should be, then the feeling of aim assist, or the visual implication of it, is exacerbated. The visual strength or visual effect of aim assist and how it feels in game appears stronger at higher FOVs. The actual statistical and tracking strength of it is exactly the same regardless of your FOV value, but because with a higher field of view your perspective is widened and therefore slightly further back, you notice this effect much more strongly, in a very similar sense that lower FOVs appear to sprint slower and higher FOVs appear to sprint faster, even though the value is exactly the same. One thing that is definitely different from Modern Warfare 2019 and Warzone 1 to Warzone 2 and Modern Warfare 2 is the aim assist occlusion. Now, a big problem in Warzone 1 and Modern Warfare 2019 is that aim assist would often track through walls and objects that it wasn't supposed to do. And as you can see from the footage in the background, that problem has seemingly been solved on a much better scale this time around. When a character is hidden and out of sight, the aim assist does not lock on, even if they're extremely close ranges, which is really good to see and a really strong quality of life fix that hopefully you should see throughout the entirety of Warzone. Now, there is the opportunity that certain textures in the game, certain assets, or certain things with physical values might not work exactly as intended throughout the entirety of Al Mazrah, but for the most part it looks like they've done a really good job with this. So with all of this information known, is aim assist overpowered in Warzone 2? The answer is not so simple. Anything over, I would say, 60 meters, 75 meters or so, keyboard and mouse definitely has a massive advantage. Now, like I mentioned earlier, if you're playing at a higher FOV, things appear to be further away, and when you're on a controller, the precise adjustments for smaller targets is much more challenging than it is on a keyboard and mouse, and generally speaking, controlling the recoil patterns, especially the combination of vertical and horizontal, over range at distant targets is substantially easier on a keyboard and mouse, and I found a much more easy time tracking targets over range on my mouse, which is a Logitech G Pro Superlight, than I did on my controller. Whereas at close ranges of say 40 to 0 meters, it's the inverse. I would 100% want to be on a controller because you get that really strong tracking mechanic, and if you're a good controller player, you can make micro adjustments, be more precise, get more headshots, get more torso shots, and ultimately decimate your opponents. That degree of close range tracking in comparison on keyboard and mouse is much more challenging, and even somebody like me who has played on both platforms for a very, very long time, I still find it quite challenging to track nearby opponents on a mouse in comparison to a controller. And this is where I feel the large argument about the power and overpoweredness of aim assist arises from, because depending on the range and the skill of the player, ultimately you get these very different outcomes where things feel more powerful or less powerful depending on the situation. Now, I would describe a very talented controller player as somebody who is as accurate as close range as they are at long range, because long range is ultimately much more challenging for a controller player. Whereas on keyboard and mouse, I would describe a talented keyboard and mouse player as somebody who is as accurate as they are at long range at close range in terms of tracking opponents. And when you start getting into these kind of grayer sort of 30 to 70 or 30 to 80 meter ranges, there are instances where it feels like it's a plus or minus depending on the person and depending on the platform, because at the slightly longer ranges, you'll find instances where beaming somebody with a keyboard and mouse feels really easy, whereas at slightly closer ranges, around 40-50 meters, decimating somebody with a controller feels substantially easier. And the difficulty with this is that the game-deciding gun battles between squads or opponents inside Warzone 2 tend to happen at around the 30 to 50 meter mark, which is often why so many keyboard and mouse players feel so hard done by. Whether it's the later circle finishes which compact players together, or the gunfights in individual points of interest in towns and buildings, I would argue that the average engagement range in Warzone 2 is somewhere around 40 to 50 meters, where controller players ultimately have a slight advantage. But if you listen to controller players, they will say that that's not really the case, or at least some of them won't feel that way. And the reason why is very simple. and it's to do with that earlier mention I had of the vertical and horizontal recoil. Now, whilst to somebody like me who has played countless hours of this game and countless shooters, the recoil feels extremely controllable and traceable, to most average players, that is not the case, especially considering as it presently stands, and this is a feature of Warzone 2 and Modern Warfare 2, not only do weapons have horizontal and vertical recoil patterns, which pull quite drastically and quite frequently in different directions, but they also have variations of those patterns. So it's not the same pattern every single time. There appears to be 3 or 4 different recoil patterns, and that can make it quite difficult for the average controller player to adjust things over range. Now, for somebody like me who plays on ultra precise settings and ultimately aims for micro adjustments to stay accurate, I don't have a problem with this. But for the vast majority of players, which by the way, you should really check out my controller settings videos, this can be an issue. And often what I've found over range as a controller player is, despite the fact that aim assist seemingly does kick in up until 200 meters, a combination of the muzzle flash, the muzzle smoke, the gun kick, and the recoil pattern in front of me means that regularly the actual recoil pattern is pulling away from the target far more than it ever did in Modern Warfare 2019 or Warzone 1. Those guns were straight up laser beams comparatively. In Modern Warfare 2 and Warzone 2, guns have intended target ranges, and the recoil patterns on some of them, especially things like the AK, tend to be quite dramatic and actually pull you away from the aim-assisted bubble. So it almost feels as though at longer ranges, when you're firing at an opponent with a controller, there is a point whereby the recoil pattern is pulling so high and so frequently that it's actually pulling you off target and pulling you away from the actual bubble of aim assist in the game. And this effect, of course, gets worse and worse depending on the distance of the target and how far away they get. Comparatively, controlling those recoil patterns seemingly is much easier on a keyboard and mouse, despite the fact that that variation still exists for both platforms. So what is the answer here? From somebody who plays controller and keyboard and mouse, is aim assist truly overpowered? And honestly, I don't think the answer should be a definitive yes or no. In my opinion, yes, aim assist is slightly overpowered, but I don't think it's the actual process of aim assist itself, the slowdown values, or how it interacts with recoil in different ranges. I honestly and genuinely believe that if they reduced the overall rotational aim assist by a good 20 to 30%, the game would be in a far more balanced and entirely balanced situation, in my personal opinion. You can see on screen just how powerful some of the rotational aim assist is, especially at closer ranges. And if this was scaled back by a third, I bet you most players wouldn't even notice, and most players are already trying their best to track their targets anyway, and it would create a larger skill gap. It would have less instances where PC players are feeling like they're just being deleted at close range for no reason, and it would actually provide a higher skill gap for controller players, generally speaking, when they face each other. And considering Warzone 2 and Modern Warfare 2 have input-based matchmaking, that's definitely something that controller players probably would like to see. At close range, controllers do dominate, especially up until around the 50-meter mark, but at longer ranges, keyboard and mice dominates. And unfortunately, due to the nature of a battle royale, all of your gunfights could happen anywhere between 0 to 300 meters, and your input device could help you or hinder you in these scenarios, and it could also depend on how good a player you are. I genuinely think a fairly subtle, or at least a third reduction of the amount of rotational aim assist would put the game on a level playing field where absolutely nobody could complain. But at the bare minimum, at least aim assist is working far more as it was intended in comparison to Warzone 1 and Modern Warfare 2019, and has less broken instances of tracking targets that it shouldn't. I'd like to hear your thoughts and feelings on this in the comment section below, and also, when you do let me know how you feel about this, contextualize it. What platform are you playing on? What TV or monitor are you playing on? Are you playing casually, competitively? Are you playing on a high FOV or a low FOV? The more information we have in terms of what your opinion is, will contextualize everybody's point of view far better, and it'll be much easier to understand where people are coming from and be a little less feisty towards one another when you understand that. As always folks, thank you for watching, feel free to drop a like, and I'll catch you again in the next one.